figure out what we need to do that works. There is no book. But places like Eastern Market and others around the country are trying to build a book around how you take apart the food system, which doesn't matter the scale, these are the component parts. You gotta grow it, you gotta process it, you gotta distribute it, you gotta retail it. We think you gotta do more at the end of the life cycle to make more nutrient waste out of waste products rather than just burying and burning it. And we have the task of educating, trying to figure out who's gonna farm next, because this great advantage of taking people out of agriculture is sort of one unintended consequence is that 56% of people thought farmers are over 60 years old, age rate. Now the good news is farmers don't die. They don't retire. They don't retire, but they do eventually die. Secondly, I just realized you're filming this and I'm walking around like a madman, so I apologize for right now. I'll move slow. And then we have to educate a new generation of eaters and consumers and people for whom fresh food products are like a mystery. And so that's a lot of work to build out those. But our goal is to work on processing, distribution, recycling, which we've been doing since 1891, and to try to do more work with partners on other things, like food production. Now, I don't like the term urban agriculture. I don't like it when it's misused as a proxy for regional food systems, in the sense that urban agriculture is just the production part, not all the other pieces. And so you say urban agriculture, and mayors and economic development officials don't understand why you want to turn their perfectly dense city into the next Detroit just to grow more corn in the soil. But that's not what we need. And in Detroit, urban agriculture has been profound. 80 community gardeners, formal participants in a program called Garden Research Collaborative in 2004. This year, over 1,600. And 70 or 80 largest of them show up at our market and other markets under the banner of Grown in Detroit. And I would argue vehemently that the food produces the third most important outcome of this program. The most important outcome is neighbors working with neighbors to effect positive change, empowering themselves to do positive change without much help from anybody else. And the second most important outcome is the experiential education of Jimmy and Johnny, Mom and Dad, and Grandma and Grandpa, pulling the carrot out of the ground and concluding that that might be food rather than the Twinkie from the convenience store. The food produced is kind of gravy on top of that. But it's coming. You saw the one family, there's like 5 now emergent independent entrepreneurs that have come out of that co-op. And in the market district, you'll see the Detroit Market Garden, whose job it is to try to enhance that flow of small-scale food producers. We think the sweeter spot, however, is not in production but in processing. So the market is a place where we, since 1891, have provided low-cost entry for people either growing food or making food products to bring it to market. We've spent about $16 billion fixing up facilities, Sheds 2 and Sheds 3. We're finally finishing up Shed 5, which is the home of our plant flower growers, and the home of a very pivotal project, our shared use community kitchen, whose purpose it will be to do 2 things they're already doing, only better. Increase the rate of small business creation around those adding value to food crops, niche food products, pastas, jams, jellies, pierogies. 125 vendors we have today that sell food products. But more importantly, we have 100 people that have an idea but haven't figured out where to make their product or how to make that product. And so providing them the space and technical assistance to come to market is an important part of our function. We are regarded as a place, interestingly, by MIT as one of the 15 most iconic public spaces in America. We're proud of that. We're especially proud of it because until next spring, we really don't have any place for people to sit during Saturday markets. We are on that list because of the economic democracy that happens at that market on Saturday, where everybody, bank president to homeless person, is buying food more or less from the same vendors. And our goal is to make sure that we retain that authenticity of this place where all are welcome. So we grow food vendors right now, sausage makers and pickle guys. The McClure brothers started making Grandpa's recipe on Mom and Dad's back porch. They're in their 3rd location now in a former American Axle Auto Parts facility just north of the market area with 30 employees distributing their pickles into 29 states. So our role at the market is to help all. Everybody from the neighborhoods, where we've built 2 kitchens already, one in the southwest side, one in the Osborne neighborhood, to get people from the neighborhood into entrepreneurial businesses, and then to grow them once they're in the pipeline. And we don't care how small they stay, but we're especially interested in those that can have that growth opportunity to create at first tens and later hundreds of jobs and hopefully thousands of jobs to put people to work in Detroit. Because I don't know about you all, we can talk about health outcomes and fit into the place of our cities, but jobs is a good place to start also. What about the factor of stress? I always thought that stress is unappreciated.
It doesn't bother you.
Okay. Well, we're very proud of our work and our subsequent project. Five-ish?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Perfect.
I got five. Give me five. We don't stop when we get to market. Our goal, again, is to move along the path. This is called the Regional Food Accelerator Project. We're going to have a little bit of state-of-the-art technology. And I didn't want my comments about big and small to be confused with high-tech or low-tech, because I believe that both have an important part of making food better and safer. The anchor tenant for this project is a company called Garden Fresh Gourmet. They're the largest makers of fresh salsa in the United States. Most people know that. What you may not know is that they're the largest seller of hummus in the state of California, all from their plant in Ferndale, Michigan. And they have achieved status as the largest maker of salsa because they've not found a better method than the low-tech way of making their restaurant-like salsa recipe in 5-gallon buckets, which they started out making a few, now they make semi-loads every day. Hummus, however, they're number one in California because they have a great product, tastes great, has 45-day shelf life, because they are masters of a process that is fairly rare in this country called high-pressure pasteurization, which uses 66,000 pounds per square inch of water pressure as a preserving technology rather than heat or rather than preservatives. So it gives Whole Foods, for whom, for example, they are the makers of their private label hummus, 45-day shelf life with excellent flavor, no preservatives, and all the good stuff hasn't been killed with the heat that happens in traditional pasteurization. So I would argue we need to be smarter. We can't look down our nose in some Ludditic, is that Neil Luddite? Luddite? I don't know if that's the right pronunciation. Ludditic fashion, and old is only good, and new is bad. Appropriate is appropriate. We need all the help we can to feed 9 billion people by the year 2050. And I sometimes get beat up by people in crowds like this where I'm not advocating we should be 50 billion people by the year 2050. If there are other means to get there besides mass famine and war, I'm for it. That's what the trend line would indicate. We have Detroit, it's unhealthy, so we are trying to apply many of the best placemaking aspects to make it a more connected place. This is one of my favorite bits of how the built environment sometimes skews our daily activities. In the 1960s, the Federal Highway Administration put a 6-lane freeway between the meat department and the produce department at Eastern Market. So on the other side of the freeway, past this little narrow pedestrian bridge, is the Gratiot Central Market, which is a private market, 500 feet of meat, as the locals call it. Does not bear any relationship to this photo, which is from Barcelona, where fruit and vegetables are kind of celebrated as part of their food culture. This is, in fact, the display that used to be at Gratiot Central until the operator of this green grocer lost his food stamp privileges because it's selling alcohol and tobacco products to customers. So today there's no produce in place that sells between $25 and $35 million worth of meat each and every day, 6 days a week. So next year we hope to open up a model green grocer, 2,000 square feet, dedicated to the proposition that we might be able to sell a little bit more fruits and vegetables at the same time you're buying meat. We don't have high expectations. We think it's a great laboratory to see how, we know that diet change is difficult, but through incentives, through education, through retail display, what works? And we can use this as a very interesting laboratory to try different tactics. We also think markets are important, not just for food, but for the economy. Detroit's neighborhoods have an unemployment rate in north of 50%, a lot of informal economy happening there. The Italians are really good at informal economy, underground economy. This is Torino, Italy. A third of all soft goods retailing happens in their public markets. So we're inspired, that's inspired our Sunday market to try to create that entry into the market for non-food products on Sunday, the way the Saturday market has been for those who make food products. So it's an ambitious plan. We're about 30% of the way there, $40 million. in the sheds and in infrastructure improvements around the market to make it a more compelling and walkable place. We get special dispensation because of our authenticity, so graffiti doesn't bother us. It's just actually adds to our value. So the worst block I've ever dealt with as a downtown manager spent $10,000 and 2 weeks later, but removing all the graffiti 2 weeks later looked like that. But that didn't deter the Red Bull Corporation from opening at that time its third art salon in the world after Sao Paulo, Brazil, and Lisbon, Portugal. So if graffiti was good enough for them, we're figuring out curation strategies rather than elimination strategies. But we have to manage gentrification. We're in part the last of these authentic old school working food districts left because the real estate didn't become more valuable as bars and boutiques and lots. And we have to find more guys like Mo, the shoe guy, who's our only permanent vendor. He still has a shoe stand 1 day a week in an office building downtown. It was free rent, it was a good start. But being on the main line of our market has already given him 3 opportunities he wouldn't have otherwise. Number one is a shoe retired cobbler of the year twice by the National Cobblers Association, retired and former president of the National Cobblers Association, walked by the market, second week Mo was there, breaks down in tears, hasn't seen a cobbler at farmers markets somewhere in Bavaria 35 years ago, kidnaps Mo, takes him to New Jersey and gives him 3 weeks of specialized training. Number two, Eastern Market customer gets to know Mo from just walking the market, has a vacant cooperative on East Jefferson that Mo and his family now live in, far nicer accommodations than he had previously. And third, a Southfield-based 6-day-a-week retail shoe repair facility needed a part-time guy. Mo now has a job to save money so that when we remodel shed for it, we can build out a more permanent facility for it. This is the trail system that's emerging in Detroit. This is the second phase of the Quinter Cut, under construction right now. We'll open up next spring, and we'll link the riverfront through Eastern Market to the trail that will connect to Midtown and Wayne State and health campuses there. And this is the 10-year vision of what that can look like. So we want to gentrify that part while we make sure the rest of the market stays safe for those dirty and loud food businesses. I will wrap it to say this work isn't done by us, it's done in collaboration with a ton of partners from Mitch to all sorts of folks. Lastly, if you think that those guys can never take market share from you, I say to you, it's already happened. Now, too many of our leaders think about small-scale food systems. They look past food as being important at all, even though it's the second biggest economy in Michigan after manufacturing. And small food is not a return to medieval times. Oh no. Let's look at craft beer with some old numbers. It's actually much better news now. Craft beer is up to 14.8, almost 15% of market share by value, 8% by volume. It's the only growing part of the American beer economy. And it was accomplished without any government policy. It was accomplished again that narrative between customers deciding they wanted a better quality product and they were willing to spend a little bit more money for it. I would argue that's precisely what needs to happen and is happening as you see people's increased attention in where food comes from and its source and how it's grown. We have 3 lenses we look at. Purists will look at market and say, you're not a farmer's market, you're a public market. We would say we're proud of that because we have people who want pineapple, lemons, limes because they depend on the market as their grocery store. Our first objective is to get people to eat more fruits and vegetables. Our second objective is to get them to eat more regionally grown fruits and vegetables. And our third objective is to get them to eat fruits and vegetables in the region that are grown with better regard to the chemicals that are used in their production. That's important for us. Lastly, I would just argue that, I forget my last
time, we'd like Dr. Jackson to come up, and he's gonna, if we can get
Dan, you get up here, Dr. Helmani. Ray. So, can I moderate?
You can moderate.
As immoderate as I can be. Ray, you left something out in the reasons that tobacco went down. You gave You said 4 reasons, but you only gave 3. And the 4th one, I will argue, was the environmental tobacco smoke laws, which, by the way, changed heating, ventilation, and indoor air quality in profound ways. What would be the code or law requirements if you could sit here and just write a law to say, we're going to make people healthier, particularly by changing some aspects of the world that we're building? What would be on your wish list? And any one of you can answer this, but I'm looking for, ultimately we have good intentions, but unless it's put into code, put into law, things don't happen.
So, I don't know, is this on?
It's on.
Okay, well, we've done some interesting laws, like in the city of Houghton, in our zoning code, the part about parking, we actually wrote a bike parking law in there so that multi-residents or businesses, new ones, would have to provide a certain amount of bike parking places, and they'd have to be secure. I mention that because it's kind of cool, but I think it's kind of silly. It's the example of a little detail thing. What I want to say is about encouraging more walking and biking and transit use. It goes way beyond transportation policy. It goes right back to land use planning. So that's the example I want to give is, we used to have a lot of little neighborhood schools, especially elementary schools, and that's why it was, along with the grid system of streets, so that traffic was dispersed and not on the 6-lane highway. That was a big reason why kids could walk safely to school, because it was in their neighborhood. What we've done now is, because of economies of scale, we have these large schools that have to be on a 40-acre campus. We've moved them out where the land is cheap. It's not where people live, and everybody has to be bused there. So it's not even about laws that say you have to have a bike lane or how wide the sidewalk is. It goes all the way back to land use planning.
Okay, and my colleague, Don Shoup, who is the expert on parking, says that all parking meter revenue ought to go to the storefronts, walkways in that neighborhood and not be dumped into the general plan, because then you get the benefits to the people who are actually there, and you do not get opposition from the merchants who are in those areas. So there actually goes to the people who are there, and it's really been transformative in places that this has been done. I'm going to press a little bit. So please, Mahmoud.
I think it's not a specific law or a specific code as much as a general shift in the way we look at policies. And I think health in all policies, where each policy or any regulation should have a health impact assessment,
Absolutely.
Whether it is building a highway or a bridge or a code for where to build a school. This is where we need to bring in the policymakers and those that put regulations to understand that any decision has a health impact.
And I have infuriated my environmental friends because I say I don't like environmental impact reports and environmental impact assessments. You say, what? You're an environmentalist, you're opposed. No, because in medicine, we're totally accustomed to giving people a choice of treatment options, and every one of them has a set of negatives, and every one of them has a set of positives. And every change has a negative for someone, and you want to optimize the benefits and minimize the negatives. And by just looking with one lens, and I love the environment, but just looking with one lens, the 5th or 6th most dangerous job you can have in America is unemployment. And we need to capture this. Deep rock mining, deep sea fishing, deep woods logging are the 3 most dangerous. But unemployment's very dangerous, and we ought to be able to capture those benefits. And small-time employment's just as good as craft foods. Dan, real quick, one quick one.
I would just say that we need to do a better job. If I could suggest one change rather than any policy, it would be on the facts, the data, the evidence that we assemble to make policy choice. For example, in this country, the right arguing that we can't afford mass transit because it doesn't pay.